Welcome to Wealth Coherence. I'm your host, Emily Bouchard, a social worker specializing in human development and fascinated by human potential. For over 20 years, I've been a coach to families with successful businesses and leaders with successful careers, and you may be surprised to learn that true wealth is about coherence. When our inner state of being aligns with how we live, give, lead, and love. In this series, we will explore an integrated model to flourish coherently, because wealth isn't what we have, it's who we are when we are fully aligned. Welcome to this edition of Wealth Coherence. I've been so looking forward to this conversation and introducing you to Kim Llumiquinga, who is somebody I've known for years through the Purposeful Planning Institute. And most recently, we've gotten to work more in depth through the Next Gen Collaboratory and Learning Circle that we're a part of. We meet once a month online with people from all over the world, and we get to talk about best practices and working with families, especially with the rising generation, the next generation, how to really support them. And Kim is the Director of Legacy and Learning at TFO Family Office Partners, where it's a multifamily office. You can say a little bit more about that and a little bit about why this topic matters so much to her. We're going to talk today about a concept that people throw out a lot, but don't necessarily know a lot about, which is resilience. And it's a very important character trait to have in terms of being able to handle life's challenges when they occur. And we are both very well aware of the fact that families that have a level of affluence in their lives and access to all kinds of resources can need some support around how to foster resilience when a key component of what's necessary for resilience, which is friction, is no longer there or can be minimized because of the wealth. And there's something about when you're young and little and you have little bits of friction and you get to build your resilience. And then as you grow and you have bigger, more challenges, you build more and more strength and get to exercise your resilience muscle. And if you don't have it when you're really little, it can make it that much harder when you get older. And I don't know if you use this analogy, Kim, but I use the one of like a little chick in an egg. And when they're starting to peck to get out of the shell, if you were to go in and say, "Oh, I'm going to totally help that little chick," and like open up the shell for the chicken, and like the little thing like actually doesn't survive. Like it needs the friction of the shell to help build its strength to handle being out in the world and not in this case in this thing anymore. So it's to sometimes help parents to understand, oh, it's not doing them any favors to rip away the shell. So with that, Kim, maybe you could share just a little bit about why this topic matters to you and how you became like part of the legacy and learning, director at TFO and what we should know about you to know that, oh, this is an important conversation to have with you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks, Emily, for having me join you on this podcast. I really appreciate it. And I've been looking forward to this conversation as well. I think it's really important to talk about like from what angle I'm coming at this topic. First of all, I'm not a life coach. I don't have a therapy background or anything like that. All I can say is I'm a mom. And there have been a lot of times where I've even questioned my own self with respect to building resilience in my son. And I actually had an epiphany as I was preparing for this podcast, which I will share a little bit later on. So the other flip side of it is I have worked with a lot of Rising Gen members from high net worth families. And there are a lot of times when those natural friction points are removed. And so how do we then figure out to build resilience in a situation in which kids don't really have that available to them, right?
What would be an example of when it's been removed, just so that the listeners have a sense of what you're referring to when I was speaking to as well?
Yeah. So let me make it a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
So, I grew up, my mom and I, we immigrated here when I was 5 years old, and she basically came with nothing. And we lived with my aunt for a very long time and my cousins. And so talk about building resilience, right? I grew up in an environment where, there were daily challenges that we had to meet, especially my mom being a single mom and, me being a young girl and, an immigrant, no less. And so that was natural. Now, luckily, I was given a leg up in life, and my mom had remarried, and I had opportunities afforded me that maybe I wouldn't normally have had if I was back in my own country. So, I went to college and built a successful career, and now I have my own child. And as any parent has a tendency to do, like when things are better for you, you want to take away the things that were difficult in your life and make it easier for your child. Right. And so there have been a lot of times where I caught myself, if he was hurting or if something was going on, I would do my best to try to figure out, well, how do I remove that? How do I remove that hurt or that pain? And I think as parents, we just have a tendency to kind of go in and want to fix things, right? And it could be that, in more affluent families, one of the things we talk about as advisors is outsourcing of challenges, right? How many of our clients do we do bill pay for? And so they've never even paid their own utilities in some of these cases, right? So even just practical life skills, we remove that from them because we want to make life easy and convenient. And so that's what I mean by like removing certain things that could be just life skills, even.
Yeah. Yeah, or the having to make choices, like harder choices. If you have limited funds and you need to think about, is it going to go towards a utility or food, or could it go towards having a fun evening out? It's like you're more limited in your choices and you have to make hard choices. Or if you really do want something, you need to put off getting it right away and having to save for it, plan for it, and maybe
Yes.
not have immediate gratification about different things that you might like. And that might be like there might be some small pain in that, but then there's that sense of volition, like, "I did this myself," and then there's so much more value
Mm-hmm.
towards what they've saved for and what they have as a result of it, and then also the learning around it, and then with the harder things too, right? Like, having maybe to maybe work a couple of jobs in order to pay for the books for school when you go to university versus,
Mm-hmm.
being paid for. So there's different points of friction that are natural in some instances, and then when you have a wealthy family, it just wouldn't even be considered. I mean, and it could be little things that people in daily life having to deal with lines in the TSA versus going on the private
Mm-hmm.
jet, like little things like that to be able to build your tolerance and your patience and so those life experiences that the majority of people in the culture that you're in have that you don't have can make it so that when you do have a challenge that comes up that maybe outsourcing or money can't necessarily fix, you find yourself really might be more challenged to have to deal with that.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
then there's this like strange balance. When Tyler, that's my son, when he was going through school and he had like all these school projects to do, there were some of the parents that I was friends with, they were like, "Oh yeah, I make my child do it all on their own. And whatever comes of it, comes of it." I took a different approach of, no, I want to show him like the way that it should be done in a way that maybe those skills will instill in him when he gets older. And so he knows the type of effort that should go into every single project. Either way, I don't think there was a right or wrong, but there is a part of me that said, well, did I remove some of that friction away from him by not making him struggle through it all by himself? And am I taking a risk or am I investing in something that will pay off later on in life for him?
Right.
So it's kind of
Right.
an interesting balance when you think about resilience.
Mhm.
So yesterday, my son was over, and I happened to just tell him, "Hey, I have to do this podcast tomorrow on resilience, and so I just want to know, like, do you think you've learned to be resilient?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think I'm pretty resilient." I said, "Oh, and where do you think you learned that?" And he goes, "Well, it was modeled by you guys." I go, "Well." I said, I'm afraid that when I think back on how I parented you, I actually removed a lot of those challenging situations from
Mhm.
your life. And then he goes, "Yeah, you're right, Mom." He goes, "Maybe I'm not resilient." No, he was just joking. because he has grown to be resilient. And this was the epiphany I had. Even
Mhm.
though there were lots of moments in his life where I would go in and I would try to fix things, I would try to make things better, I also did put challenges in his life. So, for example, I wanted to make sure that he had no issues with public speaking. So, we put him in acting school where he had to put himself out there and he would have to do plays and musicals and things like that throughout his junior high school career. And then we put him in karate so that he would have the confidence built up that, he could always like defend himself. Now he was little, he couldn't really defend himself, but he didn't know that, right? He just felt like, I know karate, I'm strong. So we would put him out into certain situations where we would challenge him. And in a way that it was safe and that I knew later on would give him the confidence that he would need to be resilient
Mhm.
and be the person that I knew he would be. And I also tell him, I'm like, I think about the fact that the way I raised you, maybe you could have been very entitled. You could have been very spoiled, but you weren't. And the flip side of that, though, is if you started to act spoiled and entitled, I probably then would have switched my parenting style.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm glad you said that about parenting style because I think that finding one that really resonates for you and your personality, but that also fosters this sense of strength and personal efficacy and resilience in the child is so important. And when I was a social worker doing foster care and adoptions for children that were in the foster care system, I did a bunch of research in terms of different parenting styles that might be helpful for parents that were parenting children that had come from traumatic experiences. And one of the ones I really loved was one called Love and Logic. And in it, they use this concept of natural, authentic empathy with
Hmm.
natural consequences. And what we're talking about a lot here is like when parents, out of the love in their heart and the empathy, remove the natural consequences, it doesn't allow for the learning of the child. And in the framework, it gives like three different examples of parenting styles. And of course, there's loads more, but one is like the helicopter parent that covers and fixes everything and can't tolerate any discomfort. And then the other was be the drill sergeant parent that's like, do this because I say so. And, you're getting up at the 0600 and you're going to make your bed and you're just because of all the rules you have to follow, which is like, there's no relevance to it. You just learn to be a really good rule follower out of fear, right? And the one
Mhm.
that they really promoted was one of being a consultant, where you actually ask really effective questions for the children where they need to discover for themselves their answers, but where you support them, like what you were describing. Like, no, I want him to understand how to be good at being a project manager. He's got a major project to do. I want him to understand there's a time frame. There's things that you need to do to
Mhm.
plan ahead. There's, don't wait till the last minute. Like you can do things to support them in that. And it was so amazing because at the time I was helping to raise my granddaughter because my stepdaughter had her when she was 19 and we all lived together and we decided we were going to do it as a family. And she would go back and forth to her father's and our place. And we were so consistent. And I think consistency is another one. Like when you're
Mhm.
consistent about a boundary and consistent about showing up a certain way, you need to follow through with it. She was 3 and she was, like, really having a hard time and kind of complaining and whining, and her mom was great, and she said, "Oh, I think that you might have forgotten which house you're in because this is a house where, you can use your words and you can figure some things out for yourself and you can get your needs met, but you know how to do it here." And she just was like, "Oh, yeah," and she, like, brushed herself off, and she went and she did what she needed to do, and it was like, "Wow, this really works." Like, it's just but it is that consistency, and I think when you have so many resources, you have staff and you have so much there. And you want to set a boundary, like a teenager takes the car without permission, maybe gets an offender bender, maybe brings it back without it being filled up. And you said, no, you can't use the car. Do you stick with that and have them feel the pain of not having access to the car? Do they have to do something to regain that access again?
Mhm.
Or is it more like, you get busy with other things and they just take the keys and go. Like that's the sort of thing, like what's in place to make it so that the things that you choose, you are consistent in following through on. And curious what you've seen with the work that you do with the families that you work with in terms of helping the parents to make those choices that are it's kind of difficult in the short term for that long term investment you're talking about.
Oh, yes, for sure. And that's the thing is one of the things that I was reading when I was researching this topic, there's a pediatrician, his name's Kenneth Ginsburg, and he actually comes up with, the 7 C's of resilience. I focus on like the four of them, competence, contribution, confidence, and connection. And so, really, the first step is learning skills to manage life's challenges. And it can be anything from financial literacy to basic life skills, right? Adulting, learning how to make decisions, good decisions, and also managing small responsibilities. And then there's the act of putting it all into practice, right? Because the only way you're going to get good at anything is by actually doing the things that you're learning, right? In a safe environment without fear of like being reprimanded for
So key.
failure,
Yep.
right? And also if the young adult is feeling like they're making a contribution, that their voice is being heard, that what they do matters, that all ties into building their sense of self-worth and confidence, and that's what's really going to help them thrive, right? And become more resilient. And again, connection is super important as well. Having a good mentorship program, being able to say, hey, you're not alone in this. We understand that maybe you feel alone in a lot of these situations and people can't relate to you, but you're not. And so you have a supportive network, whether it's your family or, peers that are in the same sort of situation. So kind of looking at the pillars of resilience in that particular matter. And I had never really like put it in that framework before until I was preparing for the PPI breakout.
Yeah.
And it was really like I was doing these things, but not with the actual like uh, language or
Yeah.
vocabulary to it, right? So, for example, working with families, I try to encourage them to, take a risk on them, let them take risks.
Mhm.
So, for example, one family, there was like a smaller trust that one of the Rising Gen members had, and I said, let him like figure out how to invest it with your mentorship. If maybe he can learn how to buy real estate, right? Because that's what the family did. You guide them, into finding something to invest in and then let them use their money in their trust.
Mhm.
It's relatively low risk. It teaches them a skill. You get to mentor them. So there's that, relationship building. And then, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but we're not talking huge dollars here. You guys can take the risk with this money and it'll pay off. Doesn't have to be a financial payoff. It's going to be a character payoff. It's
Yeah.
going to be a payoff in confidence.
Yeah, when you build the competence, right? When you have a competency in a certain area, naturally builds your confidence. And if you have high confidence and low competence, that's a recipe for disaster, right? Because then you're going to
Right.
be chasing after investments that maybe aren't going to be very wise. But if you build competence with, well, okay, real estate's something my family does. Let me learn about that world so I can build that understanding of it. And then they can bring like, well, what if I want to learn about real estate investing on a different level than if we do commercial real estate. I'd like to learn about it in terms of like flipping houses. Oh, what would that look like? So they might be able to bring their own spin on it, but where they're building
Mhm.
their competence and then having the confidence to bring that forward. And what you said about that safety in terms of the willingness to allow for the risk taking at a lower cost point so that there can
Mhm.
be that learning is so key because nothing is better than learning through experience, the lessons learned, the memories that are taken from it. And when you actually have the pain points related to it, it makes it so it'll stick much more so than if it's just keep throwing money at it, right? That sort of thing.
Yes. Absolutely. And so really as the leading generation, you really need to be able to look at your rising gen members and trust them, right? With something, allow them to fail because that's always a possibility. So it doesn't have to be like millions of dollars. It could be something much smaller, right?
Mhm.
Because for them, like even like $10,000 could be a big deal, right? There's a
Mhm.
lot of pressure, when you are a rising gen member of a family, can you imagine like the big shoes you have to fill? Right? And that's always on your shoulder. So there's
Mhm.
always this kind of fear that, like, I don't want to disappoint my parents, my grandparents. But if the parents and grandparents are saying, hey, it's okay. We just want you to try, take
Mhm.
calculated risks. It's okay. We're not going to lose everything. It can be really a meaningful lesson. And it doesn't mean like just let them have at it and be careless with it. It means like guide them through this process, get them engaged in whatever the decision making process is, teach them.
Mhm. Yeah. And I do love the idea of also tapping into what their interests are. Like if they're not so much interested in investment for making money's sake. I worked with one family where one of the daughters was very entrepreneurial and very much totally game for what you're describing, and the other was not interested in it at all, but was very philanthropic and really very much
Mhm.
into volunteering and how could she give back? And so then it was more about, oh, if you build your competence around investing, you'll have that much more to give away in the family's donor advised fund if you wanted to be involved in what investments that money goes in to.
Mhm.
And that suddenly woke her up because it was coming from something she really cared about. And then she said, well, could I take risks with the investments having to do with kind of social impact I'd want to have, even through not just philanthropy and charitable giving, but also in what we're investing our money in. The
Mhm.
parents were willing to allow for that within the context of the philanthropic dollars, because they had different goals with the other investment funds, and
Mhm.
so that got her totally engaged, and then she was able to give presentations to the family about what the returns were like and what kind of impact they were having and how that was being measured, and her abilities as a public speaker and leader and
Mhm.
showing up about based on her interests really seemed to make a big difference there for her learning as well and confidence.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically what I look for with families are those types of opportunities to get them engaged where they can do a little bit of risk taking and the parents can be there or the family can be there to kind of support and encourage them
Mhm.
essentially.
Yeah. When you work with the leading gen, is there any particular approach that you take to support them in being willing to take those risks and also to allow the young adults to experience some setbacks and challenges?
Yeah, so a lot of times it's just a matter of figuring out what their comfort level is,
Mhm.
reminding them that, the whole purpose of creating a governance structure, the whole purpose of working with their rising gen members is to give them the competency and the confidence to be able to like step in their shoes one day,
Mhm.
right? And then how are we going to do that? What do you believe is the safest way to give them those skills? And so collaborating with them to
Yeah.
figure out like what's going to work best, what their comfort level is, and
Mhm.
where we can kind of meet everybody where they're at, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I know one thing I've encountered a lot, I'd love to know what you do with this, is, as the rising gen is becoming of age coming of age and, they've been having access to parents' accounts on online resources and credit cards for paying for gas and, going out and stuff, and then they're getting launched, right? They're getting out in the world, they're becoming more independent, and it's like, are you still seeing all of their charges on the credit card? Like, what level of micromanaging is happening there? Do they have to come to you? Are you ignoring charges that are going beyond what you said the credit card was for? Like, I'm always needing to kind of level set in terms of we have adults now that are making income on their own. If they are living independently, what do we need to do to start having them take on some of those responsibilities so that they're tracking what their spending is and their parents don't
Hmm.
necessarily know what they're spending everything on? I'm assuming you have to navigate that sort of thing with the families that you work with, but
Well, definitely. We have a lot of discussions around setting better boundaries and figuring out like what is a good amount based on what the individual what their career is and what their, income level is. It's like, okay, well, what is it that your objective is in giving them financial support?
Mhm.
Right? Like, are you trying to cover everything? Are you trying to just supplement? Are you just, you want them to be like, what is it? Because the problem
Mhm.
that you're creating now is their inability to really learn how to manage their money. And that's going to be a detriment in the long run. And I think
Mhm.
parents typically see that happening when there's actually absolutely no uh, accountability
Yep.
as to what their children are putting on the credit cards.
Yeah, I worked with one father, loves his daughter dearly. Daughter was really involved in all kinds of philanthropic things in their community, and he came to us and he was like, "She's become a total monster. She's like, she's. I mean, there's so much money on these credit cards." I'm like, "Have you ever gone through how much she's spending?" And he's like, "No," and he was on the board of a local, really amazing department store chain, and so they got like I don't know 50% off with their card.
Wow.
And so she was even spending like like a normal person would have been twice as much, like,
Right.
so it was one of these, like, we have these, like, reveal meetings where we talk about how much
Yes.
you're worth and everything. This was a reveal meeting
Yes.
about credit card spending, and she was in shock. She had no idea because it was no transparency. There was no understanding about it. So we completely level set, and we just looked at, like, what did it mean to be such a generous father and want his daughter to have this freedom of expression through fashion and through and also her engagement within the, philanthropic sphere in their city and, lots of galas and lots of different things, and,
Mhm.
so that was all part of the identity and the family, and so we talked about it from, the purpose of the wealth, the parameters that they wanted to use, and then also their family's identity and what did they want, and, played with, like, the idea of power of half, like, wow, this was cut in half. What if you did it in half again, and half of that money went towards giving to the charities as opposed to the clothing that you were wearing for the and really expanding out that notion of what she could do with this money that was it she had access to.
Mhm.
It ended up being such a valuable conversation for the family in terms of what are we about, right? It's not good to, like, blow up at your young person that you've given free range and then be like,
Right.
"How could you be spending like that?" Well, because there's never been any reason not to, right?
Right. You've never set the boundaries to begin with.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
now we have to like figure out how to do it in a way that's not totally shocking to the
Yes.
individual. And, like that, your story is very positive. I had a situation in which a young woman basically was told, you only have about 3 more months and then you better figure out how to like support yourself. So it was
Oh,
pretty harsh. And I had to work with her for quite a while to try to set a livable budget,
mhm.
but she did it. And it
Good for her.
really helped her to grow as an individual to have been put in that position, and that was the positive out of it, but it was pretty extreme.
Well, yeah, especially when it's so shocking when it's been nothing or, oftentimes what I've seen in families is with the best of intentions, parents love their children, they want them to be happy, they don't want them to experience discomfort and pain, that they will set a boundary and then they'll cross it. The parents will. They'll just be like, "Oh,
Mhm.
no, no, let's go ahead and get this," or,
Yes.
they'll tell them, "Look, I really want you to be starting to pay attention to how much you're spending," and then they'll, "Oh, let me get this for you," and it's like, "Oh, yeah, totally understand why you would want to, but that defeats the purpose of what you were trying to accomplish over here." So
Yes.
there's a lot of re-educating and then, being a presence, like, to support the parents and changing their behaviors with the kids because they're not children anymore, they're getting older and they need to experience what that independence is like and to struggle, and it's part of their
Yeah.
identity development too. Yeah.
And sometimes it's about, giving them the space to solve the problem. Like,
Mhm.
don't try to jump in right away, right? Just stand back and see what happens, knowing that, you can be a safety net if things are about to, like, totally explode,
Mhm.
right? So my son, when he was 18 months old, we put him in a Montessori school, and this was a true Montessori school. He was not allowed to have diapers, no pull-ups, like, we had to send him with 3 different changes of clothes. They did not drink out of sippy cups. They drank out of real glasses and things like that because they're like, if you treat them like little human beings, guess what? They step up to be little human beings, you know.
Mhm.
But if you treat them like little babies, they will be little babies. And so that was a learning moment for me to say, hey, imagine like when you challenge your child and you see what they can do just on their own. I mean, that is something that as a parent, you're like, wow, you know, that's pretty impressive what
I
they've
love that,
done.
and you just reminded me the best phrase that we got from the Love and Logic was whenever there would be some sort of, I don't know, breakdown of a boundary being crossed or mistake, the statement that we would make to the child would be, "No problem." And then they
Mm.
realized, "Oh, it's a problem for me to solve. It's not a problem for my parents to fix or my grandparents to take care of." And it was more like, "Oh, I know what that means." It's like, "Oh, no." And and it really helped us with my stepdaughter 'cause, she was 19 living with us. She was a mother. She was figuring it out, and I'll never forget it. She was like, "Oh my gosh, did you listen to the one about, taking out the trash?" And I said, "Oh, not yet." She said, "Oh, it's so good." And she goes, "But you're gonna use it on me." And it's like, "Well, good. Then you already know, so it'll be super simple." And, you can have fun with it, you can be playful with it, and then I would say the other thing is a lot of grace with each other. Like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's how I would have done it in the past. And of course you would think that I would do that right now, and we're doing something different now." And it's for what you're saying you want. You want to be treated like an independent adult. We need to really stick with this. If that's a mistake, let me back up a second here. Or, oh, Kim reminded me you know, I transferred that money too quickly. I needed to stop and really figure it out. So not going to do that again. Like, so there's like this willingness to be able to say, we're all learning together and we're all going to be making mistakes together with this. So,
I have this one family I work with, they're so great, and, you know, the son, he's just so adorable. He was talking about, like, how his parents are just so generous, right? And that he really had no boundaries for the longest time, and then he had, like, a moment in which his parents kinda sat him down and said, "Okay, like, you are really overspending at this point," and he had no idea, and so after that conversation though, like he realized he became more cognizant of kind of how he was spending, how much he was spending, what he was
mhm.
doing. And it really like opened his eyes. I mean, so it's just like it's amazing the reaction you get, you know, and the learning. And now he's like saving his own money because he wants to go to school in New York City and he knows that's going to be expensive. So he had this whole plan laid out of this is how much I'm going to save up in within 6 months for, you know, to go live there, you know, and I thought, "Wow, that's incredible." Like, what a young man who's just really shown how responsible he could be, you know,
Mhm.
he's got a plan, he's got an idea, and so, like, parents, you can turn it around, you know, you might feel like, "No, I've gone down this path and I can't change," or whatever, "My kid's
Mhm.
already, you know, doing the wrong things," but I think if you have, like, some honest conversations and set boundaries and, you know, you do it with love, like, they'll get it, and they're gonna
Mhm.
be better off for it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've seen that so often, and it's even when they've gone really off the rails. Like, I had to work with one family with a really wonderful teenager. He's just turning 16, and he was starting to get into some serious like, it was like, oh, he could go over a cliff really quickly, and so we did some major shifting in terms of getting some supports around him and some really clear boundaries, and I was checking with the parents and like, "He's lecturing us on nutrition now." And it's like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah." He's like, "No, no, you wanna limit carbs." And the parents are just so thrilled. It's like he's showing up as this young man who can cook for
Yes.
himself, and he knows what he should be eating and his skin's cleared up, and they said he's gained 30 pounds and he's bulking up, he's working out every day, and they're just so proud of him for, like,
Yes.
kind of claiming himself, and he was not going in that direction, and he really fought tooth and nail when we first had to make these major changes. Because of course, he'd had total freedom, he was given a little too much rope in a sense, and
Mhm.
we had to really rein him in, and he fought it at first. He really was very unhappy, but he actually thanked them for what a difference it made
That's
in his life
great.
because he got
Mhm.
himself back, right? He got to see
Yep.
how competent he could be. So it's okay to take on something really hard and have them fight against it and be unhappy with it. And on the other side, I'll share this as well. I'm wondering if you do this too. Family I'm working with, um, parents want to help the kids as they get older with a down payment. But
Mhm.
instead of having it be carte blanche, they came up as a family with their young adult children
Mm.
with what are the criteria for a down payment. And they all agreed that the children needed to have a lifestyle that they could be self-sustaining with whatever the mortgage payments would be. Like, that they could have a down payment to a degree that they could afford to do the upkeep, maintenance, the mortgage, the,
Mhm.
insurance, and the, taxes. And so they had to figure out the money related to that, and they had to figure and then the parents didn't put a number on it. They're in an amazing position where they didn't have to, but the kids got to see, "Oh, we get to determine,
Yes.
you know, the neighborhood and where we get to live and what level of home based on what we choose to do in our lives." And the
Mhm.
parents were great. They were like, "You know, if you wanna take on more of a service position in nonprofit or teaching where you're not gonna get a huge salary, we will, you know, look at other assets besides your income." Right?
Mhm.
Like, what's the impact you're making in the world? And we can measure it from that too. So,
That's
you really
amazing.
bring your values to the conversation.
That's great. I mean, I love the families where they're already engaging the Rising Gen members, and the Rising Gen members can then kind of help develop some of the family policies.
Oh, huge difference.
That is
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, again, you're teaching them about contributing their ideas, then you're also cultivating their own self-confidence because they feel heard and respected by the rest of the family. They're creating the rules that they have to abide by, so then that's better for you. Like
Always, always. Yeah, that's like, "Oh, let's go back and look at what we
Mm,
all created or what that committee created, and, like,
exactly.
does it still work for what our values are now?" Yeah, I totally agree.
That is the
And is there
ideal situation.
and with your role as a mother, with your role with so many families that you're helping to usher through this time of transition from children to young adult to being part of this family system, and the decision-making part of it, is there anything else you'd wanna share in terms of what you've learned in terms of the resilience and how to really promote that in the people that you work with?
I mean, I would say for the parents out there, start early. Set expectations early. Know it is and know what your expectations are and how
Mhm,
to communicate them, right? And obviously, you want to make sure that you're transferring your values and it's not about the money, right? It's about
mhm,
kind of like your belief system, what as a family, who you are, your identity. Like those are the important things.
yep,
And so I just encourage families set those expectations early. I have this one family I've worked with for a very long time and as we were going through their, financial literacy education, one of the things that I had to also message them is, hey, you're probably going to have a job, while you're, like don't expect to be living off the family wealth. It's there to supplement you, but you need to have a sense of purpose and you need to think about like what you want to do in life. Don't think that you're just going to live off a trust or anything like that. That's not, that's bad for a lot of reasons, and so having that sort of message. And so whether it's teaching them financial literacy skills, life skills, whatever, start early.
yeah,
And then, help them build those confidence. Let them struggle a little bit and, tell them it's okay if they fail. Let them take those small calculated risks, mentor them, step back, and then let them surprise you.
yeah. Yeah, and the key is, like, what did you learn when you made that mistake or you failed? Like, what's the learning? What have you discovered? What do you see you do differently? Then it becomes this iterative process that helps the person
Yes.
in their growth. And then the other thing I'll say to add to that is when you do set an expectation, be clear about it, make sure they understand
Yes.
it, and don't change it. I get a lot of mischief in these families that I work with when the goalposts change.
Oh,
It's
yes.
like, "Oh, wait. we were so clear about it being here. How did it move over here? And that's so hard when that happens. So you need to stay committed to whatever you say the expectation is. And then if you find that, oh, I wish I'd done it differently, the next time you can set a different one. But please, if you're going to state, this is my little book on trust and money, we talk about conditions of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Once those are clear, that's what the expectation is. And it doesn't get to change.
I try to remind rising gen members, hey, you know what? Your leading generation, they're going through all of this
They're
for their first
learning.
time too. And so give them a little grace. Like
Mhm.
we set policies like 10 years ago when you guys were like little, thinking that this would work. And now that you're older, we're finding like, oh, it needs to be tweaked. And guess what? You're going to go through the same cycle with the next generation. And so little bit of grace
Yeah,
for
I
one
love that.
another.
And it's like really acknowledging the older ones that have had to go through the learning process more than their younger siblings. And I love that. And
Exactly.
that I think we should definitely end with that grace given to both sides of the generational divide. Yeah, it's like we're all learning together. And I love that
Yep.
lifelong learning. Like everyone's allowed to make mistakes and learn from them. And that
Yes.
it just can make for such a stronger family.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Kim. And we'll put in the show notes how people can learn more about TFO, Family Office Partners, and you and um, the work that you do. So thank you so much for joining
Great.
me.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Oh, thank you for listening to this episode of Wealth Coherence. If it resonated, I'd love for you to share it or leave a review. This will help others find their way to this space. And if you're ready to keep exploring what it means to live, lead, and give from a place of coherence, head to emilybouchard.com to stay connected. Until next time, be well internally and allow your external life to be the fullest expression of who you truly are.